Today, we're going to cover a step-by-step tutorial on how to create this clay diagram / illustration of Farnsworth house using Vray for Rhino and Photoshop. You'll learn how to set up the lighting, soft shadows, camera angle, materials, rendering settings, how to play with clipping planes, and finally, how to do some Photoshop magic. Let's take a look. Okay, so let's start right away. So this is our final diagram. I just wanted to show you the image and then I want to show you what we started with. So when I was initially thinking about creating this diagram, I had a project and my first rendering came out something like this. So this was the initial stage. I set up the materials, I set up the lighting, but you can see already the difference in the lighting and in the setup, and all of this was done in Photoshop later on. So this was the first stage. Then I was thinking, okay, how can we reveal a little bit more of this project because we cannot see anything. That's why I decided to put some sort of like a transparent material on the top of the roof so we can actually see what's going on inside. But still, I was not convinced that this is enough because, as you can see, you cannot really see the space inside. So then I said, okay, let's do something else. Let's try to maybe, make a cut, make like some kind of a basement cut, and then let's bring this roof up so we can see what's going on. And that's how we came to this. So this was the first stage when I just did a cut, and you can see how we had some sort of like a section cut there in the middle because that's where our walls are located. And then the next one was the next frame was the rendering that was on top. So if you come back to this one, you will see if I zoom in that there are two types of renderings here. There is this one on the bottom, like this one, and there is this one that has like very small transparent effect here. So this second one was actually rendered as a separate image. So we had two images, we rendered two images, and then we fused them together in Photoshop to get this effect. So we came to this point, and then the last one, of course, was this when we fused both images. We did some post-production and we put these lines in Photoshop as well. So now I'm going to walk you through all of those steps one by one. Okay, so here is our model. I'm sure you recognize this project. This is Farnsworth house from Mies Vray. And I want to show you here the layers so you can see how we divided this model. I'm going to hide it up so you can see what we have inside. So we have, we have furniture on the green layer. We have the walls on this yellowish layer. Then we have some curtains, some glass, mullions. We have construction steel here, and then we have some stairs. This model was downloaded from 3D Warehouse, Sketch Warehouse. It was originally done by Aaron Davis. So I want to thank Davis for providing this model to all of us. And I additionally changed this model a little bit and try to optimize it to use it in Rhino, because you know that when you import SketchUp models, sometimes they don't work in Rhino. So I just managed to lower down the size of the file so we can use it here in Rhino. What we did here from this point, it's all about organizing process for our diagram. So usually what I do first, I want to make sure that I have a good lighting setup. This is number one. So you see here that I have a lighting setup layer already assigned, and first thing that I want to do, I want to create a dome light. I usually use dome lights for these images. Let me just explain you the reason why. You can see that here we have very soft shadows, and usually if you do some kind of directional lights, the shadows are gonna be very, very visible. And sometimes if you just want to get this kind of nice effect without sharp shadows, I prefer to use HDRI images, because HDRI images can really give you this effect. But you also need to pay attention that you don't use any HDRI image. You want to use the HDRI image that has some kind of cloudy weather, and that's gonna give you this kind of effect. First off, let's create this dome light. I'm just gonna click here and select one image. Once I select my image, I'm gonna have this light here, and of course I want to put it in my lighting setup. And I just want to share with you the image that I used. I shared this website with you a couple of tutorials back, HDRI Heaven. Here you can go to, for example, Overcast. That's the best option to find these kind of images. And I chose this one, and you can get it there from this website directly, and you can also support Greg on his Patreon. Now, once we have this setup, the second thing that we want to do, we want to put an infinite plane. So usually I add infinite plane because when you do renderings, you want to make sure that you have some sort of plane that will reflect those shadows. So if you don't have the plane, these shadows will not be visible. So that's why we want to have infinite V-Ray plane. I also want to put it in the second layer called V-Ray assets. Okay, our next step would be to set up the camera. So if you take a look at this image, you will see that we have parallel perspective going on. It's almost isometric, but not really. This is still axonometric views. The way that you can achieve this axonometric view, all you need to do is come here and when you have projection, just click on parallel. And this will give you this kind of effect. And now you can see, if I just drag my mouse, you can see how this is gonna stay. So I don't want to rotate, I just want to drag and set up my view here. Now here I already have this view set up, so I just saved it under my named views. But once you have your angle, you can simply come here and save your angle so that you can use it later on for rendering. Okay, once we have our angle, now we can go to V-Ray options and we can see how to adjust settings for our image. When I go here to the settings, you can see here that I have the save frame option and I have the image width and height. In this case, you can see that this is a square image, so I want to go with something like this. So I would choose here under widescreen, I would change this to square. Once we click there, I can simply increase this size, let's say 2000 by 2000, that's enough. I mean, you can bump this up if you want, but for me, that's more than enough for this example. And then, of course, if you want to increase the quality, you can go to high to have better image. One additional thing that I want to show here in the settings is under global illumination. You want to go here and set up this advanced settings. This will open up an option that's called ambient occlusion. So I would, by the default, it's usually turned off. So definitely turn that one on. What that does, that gives you those kind of soft shadows that you're looking for. So if you zoom in, you can see here how we have these kind of nice soft shadows here in this area. And it just gives a little bit more realism to the scene. So it's always good if you're planning to do clay renders to turn on the soft shadows or the ambient occlusion. Once you have that, of course, you can play around with the occlusion amount, but usually the default is fine with the most of the cases. Of course, it depends on the scale of your model, so make sure that it works. That means that if you notice that this shadow is going too far, then something is wrong. But if it's going around this kind of area, that's totally fine and you're good. Okay, one more thing that you want to check here is the save frame. This will just give you a view in your Rhino viewport so you can see how your image will stand. So this is really good because now this square is gonna tell you where the rendering is gonna be happening, so you don't cut off your image like this. So this is usually very good to have to set up. And I'm gonna now click on my saved view that I said previously, and you can see how this was the image that we have. The next step would be to set up the materials for our scene. If you take a look at this image here, you may notice a couple of things. Let me just go back maybe to this one. In this image, you can notice a couple of things. So, for example, we have one material for the ground. We have the second material for everything else. We have the third material that is going to be for the glass, of course, transparency. And then fourth material will be for these curtains, because you can see how they're almost transparent. And that is going to be the same material for our top roof here. So this is going to be the same material. And the last material that we're going to have is the section cut material. So you can see when we did the cut that we had those pinkish colors here in the section cut, these guys, and we want to make that material as well. So I'm gonna get to that just to explain why it's important to set up this material. Okay, so now let's go to the settings again, and now we don't have any materials in the scene. Let's just click here and let's create one generic material. And this is the place where I will, I can rename it here. I can just type white. This is going to be my main material. I'm going to choose here the diffuse color. So I'm going to change this from this grayish color to something whitish, something like this. That's going to be my main material. Then I'm going to create another duplicate material, and this is going to be my ground. So I'm going to call it ground. Let's say gray. and I'll just change the color to be something like this. So you can see the difference here. And those are those two materials that we're gonna have. Then I'm gonna create a white material. I'm gonna duplicate this one, and I will change here the transparency. So I'll type transparent. All right, and the last one is, if you want to make it transparent, of course, you need to go to opacity here and just change this to something like this. You can see the difference right away. And that's how you would change the opacity of the material. When it comes to the glass, we can simply choose one of those materials that we have here in Vray Asset Editor. We can go to glass, and I like to use this one. This is like neutral glass. We can just say add to scene, and we can add those guys to our glass materials. And the last one is that section cut material. So I just want to use that one. I'm gonna click duplicate, and I'm gonna say section material. And now here we will change only the diffuse color. I have my numbers here, so I'll change this now. So 227, 21, and 118. This is the color that we want to choose for this section. Now we have those materials. Now it's time to actually apply it. So this is gonna be very simple. I'm going to go to my perspective. Let's zoom in on our object here. And I'm going to select the layers that we want to set up. So I'm going to use everything. So from glass until stairs, I'm going to select, and I'm going to say I want these guys to be white. Apply to selection, and then I just want to select the glass like this. Right click, select objects, and then select the glass material. Okay, that's done. And then the ground, we need to put the ground to gray, apply to selection. And last one is this top part. We want to maybe isolate this guy. So let me just isolate it for a second. I want to ungroup it so that I can just select this top area. And there I'm gonna use the white transparent. Apply to selection. Now I'm gonna group it back. And I'm also going to select the curtains. So let me just select the layer. These are the curtains, and they will get the same material. Right click, apply to selection. Now we have all of the settings for our material, and we can actually test and see our image. So let's go to our angle, and let's click here to see what we got. And there it is. You can see that we're getting the same kind of effect that we got here. So we're talking about this image. You can see that we'll get the same type of feeling. Maybe this grayish color should be a little bit darker to get the same effect as this one now when I look at this one. So the only change would be to change that darkish color from the gray to be even more gray, something like this. And then if you do re-render, you will see that we're gonna get the same effect here. And there it is. That's what we want. Okay, let's move on to the next step. Okay, so now we actually came to this point, and now the question is how we transform this into this. So we can do this by using clipping planes. So let me show you how they work. You will go to the display, and here you have the option of add clipping plane. I'm just gonna click there, and I'm gonna just choose a corner like this. And now you can see that now nothing happens because this is completely flat. And I'm gonna bring it exactly as I had it before. And this was my settings for this base plan section. You can see here, if I zoom in, that those are the walls that are going to be intersected. If I come back here, you will see that now if I want to activate this in my view, I need to click here, and then I need to click on number 2. This will activate it, and then of course if I want to save this guy, if I want to save this name view, I need to resave it again so that it memorizes the change I just did. Now we created this section cut, but if you go to the Vray, you will see that now we have a clipping plane, and that's how it's recognized in Vray. Here it's clipping plane. Here, of course, it has the same name, but we can rename it. We can call it, let's say, a base plan cut or something like this. And then here under use object material, we can change this, and we can change this to put our own material. If you remember, we created section material. So now when we do this section, you will see that we're gonna get a different result. So when I click here, you will see that now we're gonna get that section material that we wanted. So that's how you create that clipping plane, and that's how you apply material to the sections. This also works even if you flip this section cut, if you make it higher or lower, or if you make some kind of section from point A to point B. Whatever you do, it's gonna work. Now let's move on. After we finish this, so now we got to this part. The last part is to render out the rest. So we have two images. If you remember, we have this image and then this image. Now is the time to render this guy. Everything stays the same. We use the same clipping plane, but this time when we go here, there is an option here that says flip direction. Once I click on this button, watch what happens. Now you can see that the direction of the section cut actually got flipped. So if I click here, it's gonna look everything that is below, and if I click again, it's gonna look everything that is above. So this is really good to know. But what if, for example, we want to keep something? For example, if we test this render now, it is going to give us, it's not gonna give us the background. It's just going to give us empty space. So what if we want to keep the infinite plane? There's one cool trick that you can do, and it happens here when you select the clipping plane, when you click here on Vray, and there is one option here that says exclude. So you can actually exclude some objects that you don't want to be picked by the clipping plane. So the way that this works, first, of course, you would need to turn it off so that you can see this object. Then you go here and then you say, okay, I want to exclude maybe the ground plane. I'm gonna click here and then I'm gonna click on my ground plane. Then I'm gonna click enter. And now let's turn it on again. And let's render this this time to see what the result is going to be. So let's click on render. And now you will see that we're going to get the clipping plane and also the infinite plane below it. So this is really cool to know if you want to selectively cut some areas in your diagram. And now let's see what is the next step. So our next step is to pretty much just move this roof up. And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm simply going to select it and I'm going to move it for the distance that I had before, like this. And once I click render, I would get that result from this image. So that's the point. And now, of course, one last thing that I want to add to this is that once you're doing Photoshop later on, when you want to change the opacity of something, it's always good to have the mask, so you can mask out only the areas that you want to have the opacity to be applied to. So in that case, that's why we want to include one render element, and that render element is going to be located here, and it's going to be object ID. So we're going to select object ID, and this one is going to render out together with our main RGB image. So this means that now we need to assign one ID to one of those objects. In our case, we want to use this with the ground plane. So I'm selecting my ground plane. I'm going to go here and I'm going to change this to, let's say, number 5. Click select ID. And now when I try to do the rendering, watch what happens. Now, if I go to my RGB color, everything's going to be fine. But then when I switch this, you will see that I'm going to have alpha and object ID. When I click on object ID, I'm going to get the color for my background, for my ground, and everything else is going to stay black. And this is important because we'll be using this later on in Photoshop to select just our geometry without selecting the background. I just want to share this with you, and I'm going to show you to see how this frame looks like. So this is the final frame. That's how it would look like, and we will be using it in Photoshop to actually just select these areas here. Okay, now we're at the point where we have this image, we have this image. Now we just need to fuse those two together and create this one in Photoshop. So now it's finally time to go to Photoshop. Before we continue, I just wanted to mention the extended version of this tutorial, which is available on our Patreon page. Here, I'm going to show you the process of creating this exploded isometric diagram / poster. Just like in this tutorial, I will show you the process behind creating this diagram, including the workflow, that includes the combination of Vray, Photoshop, Illustrator, and on top of that, you'll get access to all of our extended tutorials and project files. The link is in the description. Okay, so here we are in Photoshop. Now I'm just gonna drag and drop my images. I'm gonna drag and drop this guy, and I'm also gonna do the same for the top one. And I'm also going to do the same thing with the mask that we just did for the second one, if you remember. And now let me just show you how, what is the easiest way to use this mask. So, for example, you can use here select color range. You can just select this black color, and that would give you the selection here. Now, if you want to save this mask, you can simply save it by pressing on this new layer and saving it as a mask here. And now you can see it says here layer 1. I can now pretty much delete this guy. I don't need it anymore. And if you want to select that mask, just hold Control and click here, and it will give you the selection. In this case, I also want to save just the selection for the top part. So I'm going to use my Alt key, and I'm gonna deselect this area here, because we also need the we don't need the bottom, we just need the top one. I'm gonna save this guy as well as a new mask. So now I have the mask that is for the top, and I'm going to do the similar thing for the bottom one. So I'm gonna just deselect this roof, and let's say that I want to keep this bottom one. I'm gonna click new layer, save mask, and now I can delete this guy. So now I have pretty much, you know, the top one and the bottom one if I want to select the bottom one. So why are we doing this? Because in this case, we want to overlap these two images. So we wanted to, let me show you, if we do the opacity like this, you can see that it's coming there, but we have too much stuff going on all around. You can see how if I just lower the opacity, then I'm not seeing this image on the bottom 100%, and that's what I want to do. So for that reason, I want to just use maybe this guy first. Before that, I'm gonna duplicate this layer. I'm gonna say Control J to duplicate this guy, and I'm going to apply this mask, Control and click, and then I'm gonna click on my number 5 and click here. This will allow me to just control the opacity of this single element here. And this means that, for example, if I just change this, you can see how it's becoming almost invisible, and that's exactly what I wanted in order to get, if you remember, this kind of effect. So that's what I'm going for, and in this case I'm just gonna lower this even more, like something like this, so it's barely visible, like there is a top part. And then from this point, I also want to just use the top one for this copied one that I did. I'm gonna select that mask, and I'm gonna click, I'm gonna open this layer and click here. Now I have the option of the roof, and as you saw here before, we see the roof and then we see the transparency on the inside. Now the last part here would be to do some lines, just like we have here. So now I'm gonna show you how you can do these lines in Photoshop. Okay, so the way that we would create those lines, we would use a simple command here with the pen tool. I'm going to click the pen tool, and I'm simply going to, make a new layer and click from here until here by holding Shift, for example. And you can see that I already have this line set up. But if you don't have this line set up, all you need to do is, select this. You can select it on the with this black arrow here. That says Path Selection Tool, and here you can choose pretty much the thickness and like how thick you want this line to be. In this case, I chose something around 1 pixel. I think it was 1.2 or something. So something like this. And of course, if you want to change the density of this, again, you can select it. So I'll click here, and then here under more options, you have the gap and the dash, and this is where you can pretty much set this up. So here I can put number 4, and then you can see how this gap is a little bit bigger now. And based on what you like, this is where you would modify that. And in terms of the line options, we have like the solid line, we have this dashed line, and we have the dotted line. So in this case, I'm just gonna go back with this one, and I'm gonna use something like this, for example. And now you can see that I have this shape here. For our case, in this side we need 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm simply going to Control J and do this a couple of times. I'm going to select these guys, and now I'm going to move them in the position. So first one goes here, and then I'm going to select these two, and they will go. You need to be careful not to select what you don't want to select. So select these two and then move it here. And the last one will be on this guy. And once you have them in the position, that's all good. And now let's put them in one separate group. Let's call them a left side. And I'm gonna duplicate this guy with its contents. I'm gonna say right side here. And now you have two folders. So I'm gonna take the whole folder. I'm gonna say Control T, and I'm simply going to move it in the position here. And you can see that now we will get similar effect. Okay, one last thing there that I would want to change. I would want to slightly modify each one of them. So for example, this guy, I want to be a little bit more up. Same thing with the rest of them. So now I'm just gonna modify them and then we're gonna continue. Okay, so once I have them positioned, I just have one last thing that I want to do. So in this case, you can see how these lines in the back are a little bit overlapping. So I just want this to be in the first plan instead of the lines. So the way that we can do this, we can simply use the same mask we did for this top part, and we can apply it on our right side group here. And you will see that now it's gonna be inverted, so we need to go back. We need to use Control, Shift, and I to make an inverted selection, and then you can go on left side and click here, and it will do the same thing like this. In this case, if we want to get a little bit of transparency here, all we need to do is actually select this, and I'm going to do again Control, Shift, and I, and then I'm also going just to paint a little bit on top of my mask here. So I'm going to go to Photoshop tool, I'm going to switch to opacity very low, and I'm going to simply go like this a couple of times, and you will see that these will become a little bit visible in the background. That's because I'm just painting the visibility of them, and I'm liking what I see. So this is all good. And now we're almost done. The last thing is to put some adjustment layers, and we don't necessarily need to put the adjustment layers on these colors because they're already good. We only want to do this on these three layers. So we're gonna start with some curves. Let's use some curves. Then we're gonna use maybe brightness, contrast, color balance, and the last one we may use, let me see, levels. Yeah, that would be all. So first the curves, I'm simply going to make one S curve, slightly like this. Okay. Brightness, let's increase the brightness a little bit, like so. Contrast, let's keep it the same. Color balance, I think it's too blue. Let's bring it a little bit to the yellow side. And here, something like that. Levels, we can play around with levels a little bit. We can see what is the effect that we want to achieve here. So maybe making it more dark here. And a little bit here, just tiny bit. And that's it. Yeah, and I think now you can change, you can see the difference before and after. And if you take a look at this, we came pretty close to this result, and that's exactly what we were going for. So that's the final diagram. Hope that you like it. Please let me know in the comments below if you have any questions or if some steps are not so clear, so we can clarify those in the comments. Of course, if you like the video, make sure to hit the like and subscribe. That would mean a lot to us. Thank you. Okay, so one last thing I wanted to tell you. If you're in architecture and you're interested in learning more about Rhino and Grasshopper, but you're tired of searching through thousands of tutorials online and wasting so much time doing that, and you're looking for a structured learning approach with one-on-one support, we've created a course called Rhino for Architects that will guide you through all of the basics of both Rhino and Grasshopper. In addition to that, we will be covering some advanced modeling techniques using subdivision tools for Rhino 7, which will allow you to create any kind of geometrical shape that you imagine. When it comes to Grasshopper, we'll explain every single component with examples and homework files, so even if you're a total beginner, you'll be able to understand the logic and mathematics behind the program. On top of that, we'll teach you all about various plugins for Rhino that are used in architecture, such as Vray, Visual Arc, and even Bongo for architectural animation. Lastly, we will cover architectural presentation, creation of diagrams, and a couple of case study projects. If this sounds like something you'd like to check out, feel free to schedule a free Zoom call with me. The first link in the description. On this call, we'll evaluate your current skill sets, determine if the course can help you out, and on top of that, I'll share our learning platform with you so you can get a better idea of how all of that looks on the inside. Click on the link below the video, and we'll talk soon. Take care.